Good morning. I would like to call to order the meeting of the HOC Development and Finance Committee. It's November 18 meeting, and to welcome those who are joining us virtually and to introduce my colleagues. On my left is Rick Nelson, Chair Pro Tem of the Commission, and on my right, Commissioner Jeffrey Merkowitz. And the first item of our agenda is to approve the minutes of our October 24 meeting. Is there?
I move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. The minutes of our October 24th meeting are approved. We have two items on our agenda today, and I would like to turn the meeting over to our executive director to introduce staff. The first item is related to Emery Grove United Methodist Church redevelopment aggregation.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Sanders?
Thank you, Madam Chair, commissioners, members of the public and HOC teammates. Today we come before you with a matter related to the Heritage Emery Grove project, one that we are all very proud about, as well as has a rich and deep history and connection to the work that we do. Our packet is extremely comprehensive, provides the background in regards to the work that we've done to help move this initiative forward over the past few years. And as we continue to support the effort to revitalize the Heritage Emery Grove community and to support the work that's going forward, and in particular our partners at the United Methodist Church, we have prepared recommendations in terms of how we could support the church in its next steps. I am going to introduce our real estate team that will provide the details of this particular request. That includes our Director of Development, Marcus Irvin, and he will, and our Chief Real Estate Officer, Zachary Marks, as well as Jay Shepard, our Housing Acquisition Manager. Before I turn it over to them, I do want to make sure that it is clear that this ask is specifically related to how we can support the church as it pertains to the parcels that are in their possession in terms of redeveloping and creating affordable housing on their parcels. We will continue to be engaged on all of the other aspects of this development that we continue to be proud about. And so with that, let me turn it over to the development team.
Yes. Good morning, Commissioners. Marcus Irvin for the record, Director of Development for HOC. So as Chelsea outlined, we're here to present two requests related to this project, one being approval to negotiate and enter into a development services agreement with Emery Grove United Methodist Church. Approval of a pre-development budget, which we've modeled after our Sandy Spring Missing Middle project, which was the basis for it. And then the second ask being approval of a pre-development loan, which would be funded from the OHRF. We can go to the first slide. So next slide. Next one. So the first two slides, and I'm joined by Zach Marks and Jay Shepard, sort of outline the history of HOC's involvement with the church. Over the last 2 years or so, we've worked with the church aggressively to help them with the parcel aggregation. The next parcel being, of course, the transfer of the surplus county land, which if you're looking at the site plan, it's noted as parcel number 3. Once combined, that would sort of wrap up the church's parcel aggregation to complete the site plan of the roughly, see how many units we have here.
Which is how many acres?
Let's see. I'll get the total acres for you, but once you kind of consolidate parcels 4, 3, and then also 8, which includes the church's pieces, it's roughly 36 houses that would be developed on that site. Mix of singles, towns, and duplexes. As we go through the presentation, you'll see that the architecture is very similar to what we presented for Sandy Spring Missing Middle, which kind of speaks to the housing types and be able to house some of the prior families of the Emory Grove community. So the last piece is in play. We're expecting approximately in December for that county piece to be transferred. HOC's role would be in establishing this development agreement with Emory Grove to essentially outline how they would use those pre-development funds to advance their efforts. Let's go to the next slide. So the concept plan here shows you how those homes would be arranged. Once again, these are just the parcels related to Washington Grove Lane, the church's pieces, and the county piece that HOC received from the county as part of this aggregation. It does not show the broader aspects of the development plan or HOC's piece, but once again, we'd be working with the church to help drive that development plan.
Marcus, just a clarification. You said 36 houses before, but is it 36 units or 36 houses?
Well, 36 houses, 36 lots. If we kind of scroll down, we'll see the breakout. Scroll down a little more. So it's 36 total.
Units, dwelling
36
units.
Yes, 36 residents or dwelling units.
Okay.
So 8 singles, 8 townhouses, and 20 stacked duplexes. So a total of 36 units. They would be restricted under the MPDU program, so those would be some of the protections that would be included as part of the agreement. The loan right now that we're estimating is approximately $1.65 million. If we go to the next slide where we have the timeline, a lot of this was based on the Sandy Spring Missing Middle project as a template. So part of the houses from the prior slide that you'll see include the single families, duplex, carriage house, stacked duplex types. Let's go to the next one to see the budget. So we look off to the left. A lot of this is once again modeled from Sandy Spring, which would be subject to commission's approval. So this would include things such as land planning, architecture, structural, ADA consultants and such, of which Emory Grove would be entirely responsible for. The commission would not have any responsibility to these contractors. We would be facilitating by making this loan to them, and then they would be responsible for entering into all the contracts with those associated vendors. So the way we've modeled the development services agreement, essentially the base agreement as designed would be a 5-year term that could be renewed annually. Either party may terminate for any reason, but there are some provisions in there. And how those loans would be secured would be against the properties, including the excess county land. Once again, Emory Grove would have final decisions. They would enter into all the contracts, and they would own all the development materials. HOC wouldn't be liable for any third parties' errors and omissions. And then Emory Grove would form what's called a community development corporation to complete this project or carry it forward. As we get into some of the other components, we scroll a little bit down. Development fee. So there would not be a development fee as we're looking at reimbursement of staff time in lieu of a fee. And the pre-development loan itself, in terms of the structure that we're contemplating, HOC would provide 100% of this. The pre-development budget, which we've outlined as a draft here, would require commission approval. And all this would be repaid at the closing of the construction loan, which is how we've structured things in the past. It's a very short packet, but as we described in the beginning, in the spirit of helping the Emory Grove community advance their development efforts, everything is really focused around the church and these parcels. We've taken great care with our consultants to sort of tee up this development, working with county partners to aggregate the land. And now this would be the point where we could turn over the development to the church, allow them to lead the effort and provide them the support moving forward in that. So I would conclude there if there's any additional questions to take.
One of the questions I have in looking at the unit mix, for instance, is this based on survey of people that have indicated they want to come back? Do we know whether we've got multi-generation households that will need to be or want to be incorporated? What do we know about the mix matching the goal of allowing people to return. And where are we on that? Because it would seem to me that it would be important to know, and of course it's difficult given the timeline of construction to know the intent of persons who want to return and will be able to return, because I think that was part of the challenge with the urban renewal part of the history of trying to accommodate and anticipate who would be able to remain. Do we have any data from the church yet as to likelihood?
Yeah, so we don't have any empirical data, but through meetings that we've had where we've shared these concepts is one in which we've received a nod from the pastor and working collaboratively on how we can design the site plan to be within the limits of zoning. And the housing types allow for some flexibility within the unit. So if you recall Sandy Spring Missing Middle, it gives you that flexibility in which once the architect is engaged, you could look at how to massage the floor plans to accommodate even greater goals. But there's a variety in the housing types that we feel would be in, size and scale of that community. And if you were to, take a look back at some of the housings in nearby Washington Grove, it's compatible in that nature.
Could I ask you to move the mic a little closer to
sure.
you? I'm sorry. Thank you.
No problem.
One question I had about the unit mix also is, I'm assuming this is a Emory Grove United Methodist Church decision, but I saw, 25% of the units will be MPDU. And usually we aim for 30%. Is there any reason that it's 25% instead of 30%? Is that the decision they've made?
I'd have to go back to that. Part of that may be driven just with the site plan process, but I think part of the negotiations that Executive Director Chelsea would have, that would be worked into the development services goal in terms of what HOC would like to see.
A part of our recommendation in terms of moving forward with providing both the loan and our staff support is to ensure that there is an ample amount of affordable housing. And so being consistent with how we approach that across our portfolio is how we would approach it in the agreement terms with the church. And so highlighting the fact that we're typically at 30%, that would be reflected in our agreement in terms of our support for this project.
Haven't we had discussions with them about more than 25%?
I wasn't at those discussions. We've talked more high level at the overall concept and the plan and what it would look like. But given what we've done in the past, I think we can, assure those discussions and how that gets worked into the final agreement.
Yeah, the 25% was mostly design driven to get us to, a good density for them.
Mostly what?
Design driven.
Design driven. So it was to produce the unit yield based on bonuses and some impact fee waivers and stuff like that. So it was really design driven. We haven't had the sort of covenant discussion yet, as the executive director has noted.
And when you develop the terms of the covenant, is it coming back to us?
Yeah, it would be part of the pre-development loan.
Well, I guess I need to understand what kind of an agreement are we talking about executing and how binding is that agreement?
Zach, do you want to add anything to it? Go ahead, Marcus. No, I was going to say, I think the base agreement allows us to outline the path forward. And I think with the considerations that we're taking here, we would include that as part of the negotiations with the church to develop a formalized agreement. So,
as a business person, I find the ability for either party to terminate at any time for any reason to be an unbelievable contract term. it disturbs me considerably. For the benefit of both parties to be able to rely on good faith alone. And I am concerned that as a public agency, it's a very slippery slope and a very dangerous precedent from a business perspective. And I appreciate all of the history and the importance of the commitments we have made financially and that the county is making in the land that is being given to the redevelopment. And historically, this is an attempt to reverse the adverse effects of urban renewal, and the only tool that we had at the time to provide properties that were habitable and available to develop. It was just the only tool. And there certainly were a lot of unintended consequences. And I think this is our opportunity to correct some of those injustices, if you will. But I am very concerned about turning away from normal business practices that I think our fiduciary duty suggests that we need to be very cautious about. I don't know how my colleagues feel, but I am very troubled by that particular aspect.
Commissioner, let me respond in terms of the basis for making that recommendation in this particular case, and also afford an opportunity if our general counsel needs to weigh in terms of the fiduciary duty component or the precedent setting concern you've raised. I will just set the framework in that this is a unique situation in which, for the first time, we're offering to provide really complementary support to advance a development. Hence the recommendation to waive fees and to allow an accrual of our staff fees to be paid upon the closing and the construction component of this work being completed. If the church chose to terminate this agreement because they found another developer that was able to either provide additional support, resources to them, we do not want to be an impediment to that. As you know, the commission knows, we have a very robust pipeline, a lot of work that our staff is committed to produce and create across this county. And if our partner is appreciative of the work that we've done to get them going, but ultimately finds that they are better suited with another partner that could help them continue and move forward, we want to not create a challenge or a hurdle in that transition happening. It would trigger the requirement to compensate us for the work that we've done. And then there are also triggers in place as it pertains to the pre-development loan. And so we tie those things together to ensure that we would receive compensation, as well as ensure that, again, it's not a challenge for the church to make decisions. On our end, our full attention and effort has been to support them in moving forward. And as long as the provisions aren't negative towards the agency. For example, there aren't any penalties against us for withdrawing or any consequences for delay. Those are the areas that we wanted to pay close attention to as it pertains to ensuring that we did not create a scenario in which we would hold any liability for how things move along with this development and or any challenges that may come up. That's how we ensure that the fiduciary component of the work you do, as well as our efforts to protect the agency, are in place. But the provision that allows for both parties, since this is a friendly agreement and one in which we're really providing support, an agreement around how and when both parties can make a decision to exit the agreement is not one that would be detrimental or cause a negative impact on HOC. And so I do believe, of course, we're talking about legal terms. We have our general counsel. I do want to make sure that if there are any additional points of reference or context that we should provide related to any potential liability or issues with the current terms that allow for both parties to agree to end their business relationship if you foresee any challenges there or any issues with creating a precedent that would be troubling for the agency.
No, I mean, it's pretty standard for agency.
Can
It's standard for HOC to have
What is standard for?
termination for convenience
at will, at any time, for any reason?
with 30 days notice in our contracts.
Well, in our contract, but not, what is not standard is just a kind of an arrangement in terms of a development team.
I agree.
So that's, I hear the, your legal arguments, but let me go back to the beginning of this whole process. The discussion today seems to focus on this as sort of a standalone project. And in my view, it has not been and is not a standalone project. It is part of a larger effort that really was begun by HOC in the Emerald Grove area to, in fact, redevelop that entire area and to make up for some of the things that have occurred. And in the discussions with the church, one of the things that we've always acknowledged, and so it's a church, is that the church has no experience in terms of real estate or development. And for that reason, the church has been very dependent upon our staff for getting to where we are today. And that isn't going to change. To my knowledge, they're still inexperienced in this regard. There's probably one individual who has the most experience, at least in terms of working with us over the course of the last couple of years. But as is the case anywhere, one person could leave. I think that we owe it to ourselves to ensure that we are a factor and an actor in this whole development process. I don't want to see the rest of the Emerald Grove effort go in one direction, and maybe because some other developer comes along and offers the church a good deal, they take that little piece and go in a different direction. I see this as a legacy for us in HOC in terms of what we're doing for the community. And it is disturbing to me to talk about having a provision just let the development agreement be terminated with no involvement of us or discussion about ways of going forward. The other thing, I guess, that is related to this is that, if I'm not mistaken, pardon me, the county piece that is being given, the county excess land, is coming to us and we're giving it to the church. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Correct.
The terms of the land being transferred to HOC, we in effect are assuring the county that we're gonna sort of shepherd this thing through. I mean, we brought the county along because of HOC's involvement and their knowledge that we in fact are competent to do this. The other issue, it relates to the earlier conversation related to the affordability. Does not the county require 30% at least? So I think that that's another piece that we've got to look at.
Yes. Yeah, the answer is yes. 30% of the density required from this.
Well,
That's yep.
then there's no way we should be talking about 25%. I just, this is just, to me, it just suggests that we have to stay involved in terms of helping the church. I agree wholeheartedly that the church needs to, in fact, develop its ability to see this thing through and to accomplish their goals. But they need some expert assistance. And I am, at this point, unwilling, without having some influence on it, to give it up to some unknown developer over whom we have no control and we have no clue about what they want to do. So that's very disturbing.
Well, Commissioner.
Let me finish.
Okay.
In terms of the fee, and it's not that we're trying to make money. The fact is, our staff has spent a good bit of time on this over the course of the last 2 years. A development fee or some portion of a development fee would help to reimburse that. As I understand what this proposal is, it will reimburse us for staff time going forward, not necessarily staff time that we have in fact utilized over the course of the last couple of years. That's where I think, and that's part of the reason for having the development fee, is to cover those kinds of costs. So it's for those reasons that I am disturbed by some of the provisions that are proposed.
And commissioners, let me just say this in terms of even how we're approaching the conversation. You know, I would hope that, of course, you understand that what we're presenting are terms for discussion, not to be disturbed by them, not to think that we're suggesting something that would go against your fiduciary duty, but quite frankly, presenting various terms to consider in terms of how we can support this effort and this development.
Did the church request that clause, the early exit?
Well, the church did, and I'll refer to my colleagues, but I don't believe the church has requested any of these terms. What we are doing is presenting to you all what we would propose to the church as a way to support this effort. And a part of our request and thought process was that it would not behoove us to lock the church in and to require them to only use us and no one else if the church's desire was to work with someone else at some point in the future. That would not be an acrimonious, that would be a very challenging posture to put us in if they eventually no longer wanted to work with HOC and were requiring that they work with HOC. At the end of the day, offering this loan, this $1 million, a little over $1 million loan, gives us some leverage, but quite frankly, the church can decide upon their own who they want to provide their developer services. And so we can, of course, include provisions that require us to work with them and to try to create a scenario that allows us to understand if they're moving forward and have a level of comfort. But they are independent and this is their land and we're offering to provide the support. And so what I wanted to also hear from you all, you know, when there's the suggestion that we would require them to remain with us, what would that look like? Because I'm not certain in any agreement, even in our own agreements where we partner with other parties to do development, that we ever have an agreement that doesn't allow us to make our own independent decisions on what's good for us and what's good for a project. So I'd love to, you know, open for some terms, some suggestions that you're presenting that you would like to see reflected, allow us an opportunity to evaluate those, to go back to the church and have some discussions, and see if we can get to a place that feels good, because this isn't time sensitive. Obviously, we want to move this along, but the goal is to come here to hear some suggestions. And of course, to hopefully not take offense to the suggestions that we're putting on the table, but to hear some of the other suggestions that you would pose that you'd like to see for us to evaluate how we can make those a reality.
We have don't we have some agreements with developers who in fact take the lead in terms of other developments of ours? And what terms are those? And how do these compare with those terms? For instance, there are any number of projects that we've had and are in the middle of where we have reached an agreement with the developer for them to provide development services. And to my knowledge, there's not a provision that just says we can just walk away. I think there are ways for us to walk away, and we haven't reached an agreement with them to change the terms of those agreements. But it seems to me that those would be something to look at in terms of how you frame the development agreement.
I'll turn to our general counsel.
We can look at the other agreements and put together a chart to see what we've done. But I have a feeling that there's termination language in there.
I'm sure there is some termination language, but
It allows HOC to get out of the deal.
Yes. But the question is, how does it allow HOC to get out of the deal? And in this instance, we're talking about allowing them to, there have been Metro Point is one where we changed the terms of the agreement, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Kaylee?
I'm not quite sure.
Because we originally went into the deal in Metro Point, they were going to be a joint developer. And then we negotiated a change in terms of role, and there was some compensation involved.
Right.
One second before we continue the discussion, because we are in open meeting. I'm not certain if some of these discussions would trigger the need to close, but I just want to make sure that we don't get into the.
Don't go too far into detail. If we want to have these discussions, like we're getting into the round where we could have a closed session.
And so
yeah, I would just. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I was gonna add. Typically, the way in which a development services agreement termination would work is as Asha described. There is a relatively easy trigger. It's really to your point, Commissioner. It's like, well, what's yes, you can trigger it easily, but what's the unwind look like? And normally the discussion is around what happens with the balance of the development fee. And in this case, because we're not recommending a development fee, that really takes away what is usually the point of contention on the termination of a development services agreement, which would be how's the rest of the development fee paid out. In this case, what we've done instead is said that certainly any hours that we've accrued would need to be paid out. There are, as the executive director mentioned, there's also going to be potential call provisions, not potential call provisions, but a potential call of the acquisition and development loan, which is another point of leverage. So the unwind in this case would be more closely aligned to really those terms as opposed to a development fee, only because, of course, we're not recommending it. If there were a development fee, then that would be part of what would be a more typical discussion.
I think for me, I'm very sympathetic to what Commissioner Nelson has said in terms of our own interests in how this development ends up. At the same time, I'm trying to balance that with not wanting us to take a posture of saying we know what's best for that community. I think I'm I'm less concerned about the waiving of the development fee, in terms of our being supportive of this project. But that said, I think, my main concern is, given the work we've done to get to this point and the concessionary terms we're offering, is that the level of affordability, be at our usual standards at a minimum.
Yes, and with that feedback, well, first of all, I will say that we will ensure that the affordability mix if we are connected to this work by way of loan, by way of staff time, in any way and or capacity, we'd be asking for that requirement to be met and satisfied. And so we will put provisions that make that as strong as possible, as well as trigger any consequences for lack of meeting that expectation. Our engagement and work with this private part of the parcel, that's the church, our connection to it is, of course, the affordability and ensuring, of course, the overall project and development that that the community is revitalized. But also, if we are contributing dollars, time, and resources, our mission has to be tied to that work. And so that will be reflected. And so the comment here and feedback from the commission is loud and clear. Of course, we will make those modifications and ensure that that's reflected.
Has there been up to date a record kept of time commitment and resources that the agency has put into the community?
I'd have to discuss with Zach just on, we have a log of meetings that have occurred, but we would need to go back and do an accurate accounting.
So what action are you looking for today from us, other than the discussion that we've already had?
Well, depending on the readiness of the board, we were seeking support to move forward with a pre-development loan, and we provided the terms that we would offer for that loan, as well as allowing us to provide ongoing services by way of our development services agreement. And so those are the terms, those are the requests that are encompassed in this, that we would ultimately move forward, even for continued deliberation to the commission.
When we have agreements such as the ones at Shady Grove or the Lindley, to me, those set contractual parameters as far as development and fees and roles. And I guess rather than going with no mutual enforceable obligations, I just feel that what we have under discussion, at least, is just pretty freewheeling. And I would encourage the staff to look back at the agreements and the terms and conditions that we have with other partners that we have worked on, and move from those traditional business arrangements. I think, to me, there's an issue of mutual respect here, and our respect for the church and its role and its history. I think they deserve the same kind of commitments from us that other business partners do. And I would hope that we would look back at those other agreements for the structure. We have made the financial commitment. We have been able to assist them in the contribution of the additional land and all of the support that the county is contributing through us to achieve this project. And it's long overdue. The agency played a role in keeping the community center and pool in Emery Grove rather than allowing it to go to some adjacent subdivisions where the history was significant pressure to put those resources in a different community. And I would just like us to build on the things that we have kept that have been right for the community. And so with that in mind, I just would hope that the staff would really consider that there have been long-term commitments and interest and support, sometimes resulting with unintended consequences, but still we've been involved and caring, and I think as a partner, they're entitled no less respect than we would show to any other business partner. And I think that one way to show that is to have consistent business terms as we have with others. So I do not object to waiving or reducing the development fees. I think that is a legitimate contribution for us to make. And I'm delighted that we've been able to make the loan and make this aggregation possible. But I think we also have a fiduciary duty to see that we treat this in a business-like way. So
I'm supportive of looking at what we've done in other contracts and how we're treated. I guess also just sort of going back to the idea of our interest in what this ends up looking like, but at the same time, I'm also realizing, I guess it's my understanding, there's no obligation for them to even select us at this point.
no,
Right.
No, and in the difference in our prior, other arrangements is we have a lot of leverage. We own the land, it's our deal. We're in a different seat. If we want to offer more stringent terms, what if they say that's okay, we don't want those? So what we will go back and present the suggestions that are coming from the dais and from you as commissioners. But it really is, we're offering a complimentary service, nominal fee. It is up to them in terms of if they choose to move forward with us.
It's a contract, a
But one
mutual.
thing I will say, and just trying to also avoid, is if down the line there are challenges or issues, we don't want to create a scenario where we've put ourselves in a posture where there can be litigation or challenges or claims, and we really just wanted to create a agreement that allowed for everyone to carry their own liability, for us to work together as long as we want to work together, but to not bind ourselves in a way that could create conflict if we needed to part ways. And so that was the rationale behind the approach for this particular agreement.
Well, staff clearly has the benefit of the meetings that you have had and the conversations that staff have had that we don't have the benefit of. So that certainly needs to be taken into consideration here as well. And you may well be privy to things that we aren't privy to, and we're going to have to rely on staff to appreciate the fact that we are not privy to some things that you may be privy to that I have motivated moving this direction as opposed to a different one. And So I don't know how you want to move forward, how my colleagues want to move forward on this and which direction.
Is, I guess between now and the board meeting, the full commission meeting, are we able to look back at, some of those? And I would be comfortable, hearing that at the full commission meeting. I'm comfortable with the rest of the agreement, and the pre-development bond. I don't know if we need to reconvene as a committee before it goes to the full commission, if we want to hear.
I would think so.
What was the timing in terms of the additional loan and the development agreement execution?
It's contingent upon approval by our
I
commission.
realize it's contingent upon approval, but what is the intention in terms of when you intend to in fact execute the development agreement?
I'm sorry, Marcus, go ahead, man.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you have a specific time just based on where we are? I know the counties, the county piece has to conclude. So I guess in the broader schedule timeline, their timeline of sorts.
Yeah, I mean, the timeline in the packet is pretty good, notwithstanding some of the things you've mentioned. But I think more than anything, now that the aggregation is going to be completed here in short order, and the first step we would likely advise the church to take would be to submit for a concept plan review, which is not a development application and does not necessarily require that that the full transfer be completely legally complete. And so I think more than anything, it's just a desire on the church's part to start to move forward with the design process, because obviously it's not a short one in the county, and they are trying to meet repatriation goals that are 4 years away at this point from an entitlement and construction standpoint. So I think there's just a desire to move forward now that all the land is effectively controlled, and this is one of the two components, along with our pieces across the street, that are really ready to move in terms of proving the concept of heritage and regrowth.
Does the commission have to take action in terms of the acquisition of the county piece and disposition of the county piece? And when do you anticipate that to occur?
Yeah, so it sounds like, so we've been working with DGS actively over the last few months. And so I don't want to say anything formally that may be incorrect, but based on our latest discussions with them, it may be that we are in a position to move forward with more of the technical process of starting that transfer process. That would certainly be a commission approval would certainly be acquired for accepting those that legal agreement of taking possession of the property, and then in turn our transfer to the church. We would outline that in the same way. So those would certainly be commission approval, junctions there.
I guess where I'm headed on this is, it would seem to me, and I think it's correct, both acquisition and disposition and the terms thereof are subject to closed session discussion.
Acquisition,
Yes.
yes, not disposition of HOC's properties.
Okay. So maybe for the commission, we could have a closed session to discuss the acquisition of the land and the terms thereof. Because there are some terms that accompany the transfer from the county. I mean, the county has legislation that controls how and when and under what conditions they can dispose of land. And I think the commission needs to understand what
Absolutely. And we
I
will.
think that would help to, in fact, address some of the concerns
isn't that council to do in the coming weeks?
I don't know if we're, you know, Zach, I want to just caution because of course we are hopeful that the council moves forward. Until they
Absolutely.
take action, there's no action. And I don't want us to get ahead of ourselves in terms of their timing and or the next action that they will take, because it is for them to make a decision on. One point of clarification is this particular parcel, and of course, if we are fortunate enough to receive this land from the county, this parcel is one in which it's green space. So it's not the space that's getting developed on, just to make sure that we're also understanding the different parcels and the uses thereof. We will hopefully receive favor from the council. And if and or when that happens, we will be able to have closed session to talk with the commissioners about what those terms would look like. I do want to answer the question, however, that is underpinning in terms of this is not time sensitive and the anticipation that's percolating with our partners in the church. And so some of those conversations that have taken place to date has been a high level of anxiety around, are we moving forward? When are we going to move forward? Are you all really our true partners here? Can we get things moving? They've asked for us to present at their board meetings so that they can hear updates on what's happening. They've asked me to come out to do a presentation. I've committed that our team would at least also provide a high level overview of the development process, because it takes so long that they're eager and they're thinking things should move. And without movement, there comes all of the things that happen with that, starting to doubt if this is happening or if this is, quite frankly, a reflection of maybe other starts and stops that have plagued the county and, quite frankly, this particular community. And so one of the things that we want to do is show progress and show movement, show good faith in the partnership. And if we're down to a few nits in terms of making sure the affordability is there, tightening up and making sure that they have us in an agreement that allows for them to have, you know, standard business terms to the extent they desire those, we can definitely move forward in that way. And a potential opportunity to kind of advance could be a motion that gives us the conditions that we go back and look at these things before presenting, and or have another committee meeting. But just thinking about how to continue to show that this is moving along.
Absolutely.
Without getting all the way to 2023.
I would make one suggestion also. I must admit, in the packets, when we're seeing pieces of the whole, it's very hard to put them together. And I think if you're going to have a meeting with the community, that it would be useful to have large displays of the entire vision, where people can see the distinct roles and relationships of one parcel to another, and the distinction of this parcel as part of the whole. And I think that would help the perception and understanding of the roles, and perhaps I think even for me, as aware as I have been of the history over all these years, that there are a lot of moving parts here, and there are a lot of relationships that, if they could be shown graphically as to what the vision is going to be of the restoration of Emery Grove, I think that would be very helpful. And I think it would be helpful even for our commission meeting, for our commissioners to understand how this piece, they're not having the benefit of this discussion and some of this history. It would be helpful to our fellow commissioners to review or revisit why we're doing all of this and why
Absolutely.
it's so important for us to do it.
And Commissioner Simon, what we can do when we receive your support to move forward is ensure that the packet and the presentation that goes to the commission provides that historical context, gives the larger overview of the entire development. I will share, Marcus participated. It was one of the many items we went over in the board meeting, but participated in a wonderful event that took place there that also afforded him an opportunity to sit at the table with the other partners. There was, of course, presentation of the entire plan and opportunity to revitalize the community, as well as tours. And that included council members and other stakeholders, community members. So we can also make sure that we provide some of that collateral material to the commissioners. And then the Juneteenth event, of course, had a lot of historical context and where we're going and where we're headed. So we will ensure that when this does advance, that we take a couple steps back, that we make sure we always frame it in the historical context as well as the overall big picture, and then narrow into, okay, today we're talking about parcels X, Y, and Z.
I think that having had the benefit of that meeting and us not having had the benefit of it, it's one of the pieces that is missing. And I think out of respect for our colleagues, that would be very useful and helpful.
I guess in terms of the recommendation and the action, the only thing that I guess I would question, and I don't know where my colleagues are on this, I would be supportive of going forward with the recommendation of the staff, but I would not, I'd like to see it modified in terms of authorizing the negotiation of a development agreement. I'm not sure about, at this point, authorizing the execution of same. Because I think as a result of the conversations that we've had today, there are some issues that you need to look at and maybe reconsider and might impact the development agreement, which gets back to the question I asked earlier in terms of when do you think it's necessary that we have to have a development agreement executed?
It is truly up to the commission on when we want to move forward. Obviously, there's a lot of anticipation that we will move forward. So our peers and partners are anticipating that we would enter into an agreement so we can start talking to them about how to submit site plans and how to retain the services they need in order to move forward. There's no time sensitivity on our part. It truly is a matter of the readiness of the commission to take the next step.
But I guess I'm not in disagreement with moving forward. The only thing at this point, because I'm not sure what the terms are, I'm not sure we're ready to execute a development agreement, and not having an executed development agreement does not in fact preclude negotiating with them on the terms of a development agreement, doesn't in fact exclude encouraging them to prepare the process of submitting planning documents and all that sort of, I mean, all the stuff that you just talked about that they need to do can be done.
They would need the loan to be able to retain
I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't clear. I'm supportive of everything you've asked for here, which means, yes, I'm supportive of the pre-development loan.
Okay, great. So,
but the pre-development loan is not.
And we're trying to tie the two so that we can ensure the affordability and the cure clauses is what we were trying, and I will allow my colleagues to weigh in, but we wanted to put trigger clauses in both of these agreements that ultimately say, we're giving you this loan and this support, and you must have a certain level of affordability. And if you don't, we won't continue to do this, and or you'll have to pay that. But I definitely hear the concerns you're raising. As it stands, the key terms are pretty discrete. We provide you with the service, we charge you the fee for staff, you pay it back at the end of this phase and when you get to the next level of financing. And you ensure that you have X amount of affordability in this deal. Those are the proposed terms right now as it pertains to the development fees and services that we'd offer, or waiving the fee in the truest sense, but still charging for our time. And so we, of course, have heard the feedback in terms of wanting to ensure that there are stronger provisions in place related to when and how any party can walk away. So we will look at some of our other development deals, offer some stronger verbiage. Are there other terms that you would want to see in the development agreement that you don't see here?
I certainly have no objection to the final design decisions resting with the church, and that they be involved in the contracts and own the development materials. The Community Development Corporation, I think, is important, with them as the sponsor. And so I think it's only those two issues that I'm concerned about, just as a precedent more than anything else. My hope would be that there are going to be other opportunities and communities with whom we can participate and provide technical assistance or financing assistance. And so I think it's important to view this as a model, and one that we would be willing to replicate. And so if we can look at it from that perspective of other similar roles we might play in the community, then it just makes it a little more businesslike and direct. And
Is the only thing holding us back at this point just the termination clause? I think there's agreement on the affordability issue.
I think there is too. I think that was my major concern.
I'm just wondering, is there an approach that would allow us to settle that by the time of the full commission meeting so that we can keep things moving in a timely way?
I would hope so. If
I would assume that can be addressed.
Okay.
Has the church indicated what level of affordability they were? I thought they were looking at more than 25%.
Zach, I'm not certain if you heard that question.
They've not sort of stated a particular percentage. They have said that affordable housing is important to them. Obviously for folks that will be repatriated, they'll likely require affordable housing given the loss of decades of home equity and so forth. And so when we presented this plan, when we settled on this plan with them as sort of the jumping off point, they understood that there was an embedded 25% affordability just to achieve the concept itself. And so, it doesn't feel like a bridge too far if we're talking about the difference between 25% and 30%. That doesn't seem out of step with what they have generally represented.
related to this affordability, many times when the staff has brought developments to this committee, we have looked to and requested that they push below the MPDU limits. And many of the people who were displaced originally couldn't afford to come back even at the public housing limit that was established. So I'm wondering if cloaking this with just an MPDU minimum is adequate, or whether we should encourage units at a percentage of 30%, 30 to 50% of AMI, or whether we want to look at all of that, because my understanding was that the number of people were displaced because the incomes required were still too high, with public housing being there. So Rick, you've been a person that's always pushed very hard to drive those limits down where it's feasible. Do we want to raise that issue at all in addition to the MPDU?
Well, I think that clearly the position I've taken, and I think the commission has taken, is that we want to have at least 30% affordability. Doesn't mean that it's limited to 30% affordability. And in terms of what we mean by affordability, that has, as we've seen, has been dependent upon the cost and the financing.
Yep.
And what is possible. And I'm somewhat hesitant to tie it down so tightly before you have the first plan in terms of what the heck you're going to develop. I mean, you need to know what it's going to cost and what the income is going to be before you start setting those. But that doesn't preclude an agreement that includes some language that says we will have a minimum of 30% affordable. We will try to address people at 30% AMI or 50%.
Absolutely. And the one thing I want to put in context, and I think this is this, we continue to find ourselves in this posture. So I think whenever we talk about Heritage Emery Grove, we need to have the full map here. But across the street are our parcels and our units that are also going to have deep affordability mixed throughout, rental and all of the different, really the goal is to create this vibrant mixed income, mixed use development. And so we also have a lot of leverage in regards to how we make our affordability mix. And so we'll make sure that we also highlight that as we continue our discussion.
I think that when we speak of affordability, though, if we're speaking of MPDUs, that's one level of affordability. And so I don't want, when we use it, I hope that we are precise in saying that we want to get as many units driven to the need rather than it meets the MPDU limit, therefore it's affordable, because it's not affordable for many, many people, particularly with the new pricing rules of the MPDU program that the council just approved, that there's going to be a major change, significant change in the incomes required for MPDU purchasers to be able to qualify for MPDUs. And I don't want us to be back in all of the partners that are involved here will be able to use these new higher limits, and therefore people will be excluded again. So I just raise that as a caution and hope that we keep that in mind, because those changes are significant.
I think the other piece of it, I mean, two pieces of it. Number one, we go back to the desire that's been expressed to have the church be able to control what goes on.
Yeah.
I think the church needs to sit down and decide what they want in the way of affordability. For instance, MPDU, if you designate it as an MPDU, you have some long-term impact upon those particular properties. They might or might not want to, in fact, have those long-term impacts on all of the properties. At least 20% of, I think if I'm correct, have to be MPDU, but you can have others that are affordable and meet counting requirements and goals that are not identified as MPDUs. That is something that the church needs to decide in terms of what they want. Just like we have some that we developed that we are committed in terms of affordability, but they're not called MPDUs. And so that's one point. I think the other, and I was going to raise this too, and you brought it up, Chelsea, is how does this fit with the affordability we are going to establish across the street and the agreement that we have with those developers across the street with whom we have executed agreements, I believe. I'm not sure I know all, or I remember all the terms of those agreements. But again, that's part of what I think you need to look at as you develop an agreement on this side of the street. See what terms we use when we in fact have these discussions with developers on the other side of the street, which are part of that total package. Again, I go back to where I started earlier. This is a major redevelopment of the entire area, and no one piece stands alone. And then the other comment I would make, even though some of the county land will be green space, I'm not sure all of it will be. I don't know what those conditions are in terms of what conditions would be imposed when it gets transferred from the county.
Nor do we. So
Well, I'm just saying, all those things have to be
absolutely.
factored in, and until you know the answer to those questions, it's hard to finalize a development.
I'm not certain I would draw that strong distinction between that parcel and us being able to work with the church to move forward with the other components of the work. But I
don't know why you keep saying that or suggesting. I think that my comments are saying we can't keep moving forward. I mean,
oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I thought you just said until those terms are determined, you didn't see how we could make decisions to move forward. So that's what I interpreted that comment.
If I said that, I didn't intend to say it. What I intended to say was, it's difficult to execute a final development services agreement without knowing the answer to some of those questions. That does not preclude us moving forward in terms of loan and or other discussions necessary for the redevelopment of this parcel.
So if the council doesn't move forward with transferring that other parcel and it takes months, or the new council has to get seated, or any stall that happens there, we would potentially be in a posture where we'd be waiting for those terms before we would enter into a pre-development agreement with the church.
The pre-development agreement would have to then be reworded to in fact accommodate the situation with the council. But until you know where we stand with that.
I think it's on the agenda next week.
Pardon me?
I think it's on the agenda next week of the Fed committee.
But I don't know what they will do. And all I'm saying is that I'm looking to you all to ask if we could address the terms that have been addressed here. We can also put in a provision to reopen negotiations about the pre-development agreement if there are any other modifications, or if there is this transfer of land that ultimately opens up the door for us to add additional provisions or considerations. So we can address it that way with the anticipation that that would potentially be a case.
So, Rick, I mean, what do you need to feel comfortable moving forward fully? Do you want, if we can resolve this by the time of the full commission meeting, do you want a separate special committee meeting, or can we address it at the commission meeting?
Oh, I think it could be addressed at the commission meeting. I mean, hopefully these questions will be answered and or addressed.
So then I guess I would move that we support sending this to the full commission with the condition or expectation that we will receive some additional information about sort of standard termination clauses at the commission meeting.
Okay. I mean, that's fine.
Is that a motion?
That is a motion.
Is that a second, Rick?
That's the second,
Understand.
yeah, that's the second.
It's a second. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 I abstain.
I would just ask the staff in the future to please not make MPDUs, the word MPDU synonymous with affordability, because affordability, the MPDUs are now on the margins of affordability. And so we've got to not labor, that's always been a shortcut. It's affordable because it's an MPDU. That is not my definition of affordability anymore. And so hopefully we can be clear about that and be speaking specifically in ranges of AMI rather than the MPDU definition.
Will do. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Commissioner.
That's a real struggle. And I'm afraid it's going to be the shortcut that's going to get us in trouble countywide in these definitions, because the words are no longer synonymous. Well, we have another item to move forward, and that is the approval of an amended finance plan for VC 1 and VPC 2 for refinancing, to amend the plan and to reissue tax exempt indebtedness of up to 47 million on our scattered site units. Ms. Andrews, if you
Yes, Commissioners.
lead us into that, please.
Yes, thank you. This matter comes before you as a request to align our outstanding loans that we have related to our scattered sites. As the commission knows, we have our VPC 1, our VPC 2, as well as scattered site 2. So we have a couple of different corporations or VPCs that we have put under various financing structures to support. The goal is to get to a point where they're all aligned in terms of maturity and allow us an opportunity to have a comprehensive refinancing structure in place to secure ongoing support for these assets. With the proposal before you, we will benefit from cash savings that we will approximately $500,000 that will allow us to put in reserves to help future plans to address renovations and needs across our scattered site portfolio. We are in a posture where this loan that we currently have from PNC will expire. And because of the current market and the challenges that we continue to face with scattered sites in obtaining loan products for them, we do not have many other options available to us at this time. What we have presented is our best case scenarios in which we've worked with PNC to look at extensions of the loan to allow us to accomplish the goals that we've set out, getting all of our loans on the same schedule, creating additional assets that we can use for our overall comprehensive plan for renovation, and coming back before the commission so that we can present that proposal prior to that time in August. With that, I will hand it over to my mortgage finance team that is led by Jennifer Washington, who's on our Zoom here, and supported by Jeremiah Battle, our senior multifamily underwriter.
Thank you, Executive Director Andrews, and good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Jennifer Washington, Acting Director of Mortgage Finance, and Jeremiah Battle, who joined us in March of this year, will be presenting our request today related to the VPCs. Jeremiah.
Morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Jeremiah Battle, Senior Multifamily Underwriter in Mortgage Finance. And we are requesting to amend the refinancing plan for the VPC1 and VPC2 corporations and additional actions due to the requested amendments. Page 16, please. VPC1 Corporation and VPC2 Corporation, together known as the corporations or VPCs, are wholly controlled corporate instrumentalities of HOC that own 679 scattered site properties throughout Montgomery County. The VPC's scattered sites provide significant public purpose in that 99% of the units, or 670 units, are reserved for families and individuals earning between 30% and 80% of the area's median income, while 8 units are unrestricted and 1 unit is unrestricted for a senior household. On November 17th of 2017, the corporation's board of directors and the commission approved a refinance of existing debt with a new loan from PNC Bank, and subsequently on December 15th, 2017, in order to qualify for a tax-exempt structure of the PNC facility, HOC approved acting as conduit issuer to in turn lend the proceeds to the VPCs in an amortizing loan amount of $52 million, which was sized to avoid any reduction in the commission's general obligation borrowing capacity. The PNC facility, which is a 5-year facility at a tax-exempt rate of 3.297%, with an amortization of 30 years, matures on December 21st of this year. And while staff is evaluating permanent financing strategies, concurrently, real estate and mortgage finance are working together on an overarching refinance, redevelopment, and or disposition of select units strategy relative to all of HOC's scattered sites properties. And as such, planning efforts are determined that an extension of the note for VPC1 and VPC2 to August of 2023, or 24 months at maximum, would be advantageous. An extension to August of 2023 would align with the maturity date of HOC's Scattered Sites 2 Development Corporation loan, allowing for the refinance of these properties in a single transaction. After several months of discussion, PNC is amenable to the loan extension. However, they've indicated that due to the rising interest rate environment, the cost of funds have increased since the time of the initial deal, which would trigger a reissuance of the loan for tax purposes per confirmation from HOC's bond counsel, Kutak Rock. Page 18, please. Staff has completed its underwriting and operations of the properties are sufficient to support the new terms of the extension, which are shown under scenario 1. The amended terms include interest-only payments at the projected tax-exempt interest rate of 4.241%. And based upon an operating income of almost $5 million, the debt service coverage ratio would be approximately 2.53. Scenario 1 creates a savings in debt service by approximately $562,000 and an increase in cash flow by the same, along with an improvement in debt service coverage ratio by 53 basis points. Staff recommends to restrict this additional cash flow for the needs of the additional renovation of units until the refinance of the transaction is completed. The VPCs were renovated in phases, the earliest being completed in 2014. However, the units have undergone heavy use, and it's critical for staff to remain proactive in anticipating future capital needs. Furthermore, the additional cash flow produced by the interest-only payments will also be available for the capital needs of the larger scattered sites portfolio in accordance with the aforementioned overarching strategy between real estate and mortgage finance. Page 19, please. An interest rate sensitivity analysis was performed as shown on page 19 to show the impacts on rising interest rates, debt service, and debt service coverage ratio. The property would need to maintain a debt service coverage ratio of 1.4 in order to avoid a negative impact to HOC's general obligation capacity. PNC has also proposed terms for a fixed rate 20-year amortizing loan. However, it would cause a significant increase in debt service and decrease the cash flow by approximately $884,000. Page 20, please. There's no negative impacts expected on the Commission's FY 2023 budget, as debt service required on the interest-only loan will be lower than the existing, and payment of costs for the extension will be paid from available cash of the properties. The estimated costs of the extension are estimated not to exceed $100,000, representing legal expenses of PNC and HOC, which staff recommends to be paid from available property cash. Page 21, please. Therefore, based on staff's findings, we recommend that the Development and Finance Committee support staff's recommendation for the commission to approve those actions as noted. We would also add that in accordance to the corporation's bylaws, staff further recommends that the commission authorize the board of directors of VPC 1 Corporation and VPC 2 Corporation to accept the extended loan from HOC and use of the property's available cash in order to facilitate said refinancing plan. With that, I'll open it for any questions.
Are there questions?
What rehab is anticipated between now and August?
We have ongoing rehabilitation that's happening across the scattered sites portfolio. So that's a bigger response that we could provide in terms of how we approach it. But what I will say is that these funds would go into the account that would assist us across the portfolio, not just during these months that we receive the resources and I wish Terry Fowler was joining us now. She can share how our ask of the county for support, of course, for scattered site rehabilitation falls short of our overall need by multiple millions of dollars. So our need for continuing to ensure that those properties are kept up far exceeds our current cash flow. We even go to the county for additional support.
Chelsea, I am here.
Oh, great. Hi, Terry.
I'm online.
Great. Can you, if you heard the question, would you mind giving some context in terms of how how we're approaching renovations and some of the expenditures we have put into that project and our ongoing anticipated need?
Sure. Good morning, commissioners and staff and members of the public. So we have a project in the county's capital improvement program that affords us annual allotments of monies that can be used in our deeply affordable scattered sites. Historically, we have been approaching using that for full renovation of the units, but we are now deploying that money for partial renovations as well. But as Director Andrews mentioned, the total need for dollars far exceeds the available funding we are receiving from the county, and the nature of the scattered site portfolio does not allow us the opportunity to issue the debt needed to support the renovations. So the debt service reserve here that is being mentioned, these cash dollars are being set aside to support that the properties can support a full amortizing loan, but those monies are available at the discretion of the commission to use for renovations across our portfolio. Once the funds are contributed, they are not restricted for a specific property. So this savings in debt will contribute to the already budgeted contributions to that reserve.
Thank you, Terry.
What is the actual estimated remaining life of some of these units? If I'm not mistaken, some of them have been in our inventory a very long time. And I know in our multifamily, we've made an effort to significantly extend the life of our units. And I'm wondering, what is the typical age and lifespan of these units overall in this program, and whether we need to find a way to focus on these units or dispose of them or do something with them.
Commissioners, that is exactly what we intend to do in terms of presenting a plan to the board in regards to what our strategies should be. And looking at across our scattered site portfolio, analyzing where there's the most need, where there may be the greatest profit, if there was a desire to dispose, analyzing what and how we approach maintaining these properties moving forward. As you all know, in addition to just the cost of repairs, having a very wide range of scattered sites across the county also creates some challenges in terms of property maintenance and oversight. So we are undergoing a comprehensive review so that we can make a full recommendation to the commission on how we should move forward with our scattered site portfolio.
I personally would hate to see us dispose of these, because I think there's a real value in having this dispersal and scattered site. But I also know the burden of operating them and maintaining them is disproportionate for the number of units. So I really appreciate the challenge and look forward to getting a recommendation from staff as how we manage this. But I do personally place high priority on maintaining them in our inventory, because I think they're an invaluable asset. But I don't minimize for a minute the challenges of operating such a geographic breadth on these.
Yes.
I think as you undertake that study, you need to take into consideration how things have changed in the county since we began the process of acquiring scattered sites. The environment today is considerably different than it was however many years ago when we started acquiring scattered sites, and that's been at least 30 years ago, I think. And what I mean by that is that one, HOC has in fact developed a larger inventory of affordable units throughout the county, which has helped to accomplish one of our goals, which is to in fact spread affordable units throughout the county. Secondly, we've got 7,700 vouchers, which in fact accomplish the same thing as the scattered site. So that there, I think, are more reasons today, particularly in view of the cost and the angst that staff has had with these over the last 20 years, because it always comes up. There's possibly more reason to consider disposition of scattered sites. And I'm shocked that I'm even saying that.
I am too.
But I do think that the situation has changed. And the fact that we've got vouchers, which allows folks to in fact go throughout the county, helps us to accomplish that same goal. The management of the scattered site is a big strain, whether it's on staff or third-party managers. And I know from my experience with the Budget, Finance, and Audit Committee, the scattered site portfolio is a costly portfolio, and it's always an issue for us in terms of the cost. So those are things that we need to take into consideration, and we'll look forward to hearing your recommendations.
Thank you.
You might actually convince me.
I don't have any objection to considering disposal, but I obviously would want to make sure that we have a plan for no net loss.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Sort of on that a little bit, I was curious, are the 8 unrestricted units market rate, or they are?
Yes.
And I guess and welcome, Jeremiah. I know, I don't know if they play the same role. I mean, it seems like such a small portion of the total scattered site units here, but I know in our multifamily that oftentimes the the market rate helps subsidize the affordable units. Is that playing the same role here, or would it make sense to, consider either making those affordable or disposing of the market rate units? I guess I've never really understood why for scattered site, we have market rate.
For the record, Kareen Brown, Deputy Executive Director. So the VPCs were former public housing units.
Mhm.
And so when they were transferred to HOC by HUD, there are very specific affordability restrictions there. With respect to the 8 units, they were acquired not as part of any HUD disposition, but to help solve for moving folks around and meeting specific needs. For example, there was a fully accessible unit that was purchased and added to the VPCs to meet the needs of a resident that was in a public housing unit. So the strategy was a little bit different in that while the market revenue might help to support the affordable side, that wasn't the main thrust here. It was really to solve for some other issues. And because those 8 units were just standalone and could not be self-supporting in terms of a property, that were added to the VPC. So it was a little bit different. Could they be made affordable? Yes, they could be. And quite frankly, based on where they're located and who we're serving, they're probably at a lower than the true market. So they're probably in line with the VPCs as well, maybe a little bit higher in terms of revenue.
I guess I would want us to consider like either making those affordable as well or disposing of them and using the revenues from that to support if that's a feasible.
So I'd say based on the location of these, for example, several of them are in the Grosvenor condominium development in, I guess that's Rockville, Bethesda, North Bethesda, whatever they're calling it these days. So great location that we want those units to remain in. There are, however, many other units in the overall scattered site portfolio that we are looking at for possible disposition, and the proceeds planned for reinvesting in other affordable units elsewhere, perhaps multifamily, given that we get a bigger bang for our buck there. So we are looking at the portfolio overall and will be proposing decisions that optimize the outcome for HOC in terms of delivering affordability as well as maintaining a good balance of scattered sites.
Are there other questions?
No, I just moved to support the staff recommendation.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. If there's no other business to come before us, we stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great afternoon.
Thank you.